Welcome to the CareerMetis Podcast. I am your host, Nisar Ahmad. This is episode 60 of the CareerMetis Podcast, and this episode is part of a day in the life of series of episodes that we have done so far. So if you recall, in each of these episodes, I conduct interviews with individuals from a particular career or a profession. And the goal of this series or these interviews is so that the listener has an understanding of what is involved to get into that particular job or even how to thrive in that particular profession. And for today's episode, I'm speaking with someone who is a chief marketing officer, or in short, a CMO. Chief marketing officers are executives who manage the brand, the image, marketing of a company in order to position the company or in order to increase sales. So it's not an easy role. I can tell it has a lot of responsibilities, and to share with us his journey, his story, we have a guest. His name is Barry Rabkin. Hey, Barry, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Nisar, pleasure to be here with you today.
Yeah, my pleasure as well. It's not every day I get to speak to a CMO, so I'm excited. One of the first questions I always ask my guests is to ask them where they're calling from.
I am reaching you on a sunny, beautiful day in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Now, Pittsburgh has a lot of history. If you look at the American enterprise, I think the steel mills, Carnegie Steel started there. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, you got it. I believe during World War II, about 40% of the world's steel came out of Pennsylvania. It was absolutely our primary economy.
Okay, so it looks like I've given it away. I've told the audience something, an interesting fact about Pittsburgh. Maybe you can help us out. Can you share with us something other than steel, like an interesting fact or fun fact about Pittsburgh that a lot of people do not know unless they've lived there?
Yeah, so I've lived here since I was 5, so I can pull from a deep wealth of experience. And the city has changed a lot over that time, but our biggest industries are no longer steel, but still manufacturing. There's a ton of robotics here, huge amounts of healthcare and education. Schools like Carnegie Mellon University and University of Pittsburgh. In terms of a fun fact, man, there's so many things. Okay, I got one. During World War I, Pittsburgh actually has an H at the end of it, which is a German spelling. And during World War I, we actually cut the H from our name to show solidarity with Americans and how anti-Germany we were. And then if you look at maps during that time, they're all missing the H, and then it was added on back after the war to get back in touch with our roots.
Wow. You know what? I've never heard that before. And that's why I asked this question, because I'm sort of like a history buff or a history nerd, and I always love to learn and hear things about that. So thanks for sharing that. I'm sure I can bet most people do not know that. So that's always a great fact. So we can dive into the interview. Before I get into the questions that I have, I would like to learn a little bit about yourself, Barry. If you can share maybe in a few minutes a little bit about yourself, who you are.
Yeah, I think probably let me answer another question along with that, which is sort of how I became a CMO, because I think that they're probably linked. I've had a weird path, but it brought me to where I am today. So I'll take you through it.
Sure.
Really, since I was a little kid, as far back as I can remember, I've loved two things: people and technology, and especially the intersection of the two. And then, you're talking about being a history nerd. I am a huge computer nerd. I love everything about technology. And I was getting into computer programming in middle school. And then in high school, I was kind of worried about dying a virgin and being nerdy, and thought I'd go in another direction. So I started playing drums, starting out with rock and then eventually going to funk. And that helped me sort of get into breakdancing and that culture. So when I went to college, I pursued that more. I went to Beloit College near Chicago and started a breakdancing club. From that, we started throwing bigger events, getting sponsored by Red Bull. And I took an entrepreneurship course that really just blew my mind about what was possible. And I think before that, I'd seen business as kind of a dry, like bean counting sort of affair. But after that class, I realized, look, this is a way to change the world. Whatever it is that the world needs more of, you can bring it to life. And I was really passionate about street dance, and I was good with computers, and there were no good online resources for street dance. It was something where if you wanted to get 5 different videos, you had to go to 5 different websites. They were all very amateur and buggy, and you'd have to pay shipping at each one. And it was just kind of a labor of love that people were doing on the side. So you're lucky if you actually get your product shipped a month after you pay. And I felt like, look, I know there's this need. I know there's this community. And this was way before YouTube or any kind of online streaming options. So why don't I start sort of an Amazon.com for street dance? And that ended up being called cypherstyles.com. I started it with some good friends to this day. Shout out to John Turner at Expert Usability and Christina at Barclay REI. And that was really where I got my start. I had some good insights because I was familiar with the culture and the community, but kind of on the road, we all learned usability, pay-per-click advertising, web design, e-commerce, all the things you need to know to have a successful online company. And then from there, transitioned. I realized what I loved most about the role was really the marketing side and the product development side. So I started taking night classes at the Tepper School of Business at Carnegie Mellon University, just so I could learn more, sharpen my craft, and then potentially take those same skills to another company, hopefully at an even bigger scale. And had a great experience there. And we had pretty small classes. I was doing the night classes there. There were probably 50 or 60 people in my class, and maybe 6 or 8 of them actually worked at Heinz. And they were happy. They had good things to say. And I was a big foodie. I was a Yelp Elite reviewer 5 years in a row. And I thought, hey, love Pittsburgh, love food, love marketing, love brands. Why don't I think about them? So I interned at Heinz, had a really, really positive experience. And then sort of mid-internship, they actually got acquired by a Brazilian company called 3G. And finished off my internship great, got an offer, went back to school to finish. And when I'd come back, it was just a really different company. 3G is unbelievable at cost cutting, at running lean, but they didn't have quite the same emphasis on maybe innovation and some of the other areas that I was most passionate about. So I was starting to look for something, I don't want to say edgier, but something a little more creative and high impact. And I got to meet Dick Zhang at Identify Technologies when he was just getting his, pun intended, drone company off the ground. And he had some amazing engineers on the team, but didn't have a lot of people with business experience, marketing experience. And it was kind of a perfect fit. I really wanted to do something more innovative. He valued my experience. And we've been living happily ever after for almost 2.5 years since.
Well, first of all, thanks for answering my second question. I was going to ask you how you became a CMO. So you've saved me that question. But if people paid attention to your answer, one thing that really stood out for me is you are always proactive, and that may be a lesson for anyone. If you something that excites you, you want to build that as a skill. Some of the things you did was you interned, you took night classes, you put yourself out there, you acquired knowledge, you practiced, and those are all great life lessons or career lessons for anyone, regardless of what position they are in. So thanks for sharing. That's an amazing story. That's what I got out of it, saying if you want to quickly grow in your career, be proactive.
Nisar, I think you're being overly kind to me because I was proactive in that I took initiative to do certain things, but it's not like this was some master plan where when I was, 8, I said, well, this is how I become a CMO. I hadn't even, marketing and business weren't even on my roadmap. I was actually a psychology major in undergrad. What really I think I have been good about, and I give my parents a lot of credit for this, for always encouraging it, is whatever I had fun with, I pursued passionately and with a lot of focus and a lot of enthusiasm. But that wasn't necessarily because I had some master plan. It's just that all those things have ended up coming together where at the intersection of people and technology and marketing, sort of that's where my job lies. And I've been very fortunate to be able to combine a lot of my loves and interests together into one. But each one of these wasn't part of a master plan. It was just doing what I was passionate about.
That is true, and that's actually another point as well. Sometimes when you're very young, you may not really know where you want to be, but once you start doing certain actions, it'll take you to a point like today, and where you enjoy what you're doing, and also you're in a better position than most people. So that's actually a good point. So I want to go back to the discussion of CMO. I want to take, before we get into the nitty gritty, I know I gave a definition at the beginning. Perhaps I didn't do a good enough justification, but maybe you can help us out. What exactly is a chief marketing officer? What does he or she do?
Sure. Great question. The role will differ a little bit depending on the exact industry, the exact company size, but usually the general rule is your job is to help the company understand what the market needs are and market opportunities are. So that means looking at all the different competitors that are out there, all the different options to solve the problem that you solve. Where's the white space? Where can you fit and offer people something new that they're really going to value? And then how can you position your company and communicate your value to generate sales the best way possible?
So then what does a day-to-day look like then if it varies from company to company? I know every company is different, so maybe you can help us. What does your day-to-day look like?
Yeah, I am very fortunate to be blessed with an amazing team. So day one, it identified I was kind of the chief cook and bottle washer, and now it's a little bit more distributed, but I still have a role sort of helping to coach everybody and making sure that we're all marching to the beat of the same drum. That can be everything from shooting videos. This Tuesday, we're going out with Ben Sachs to a customer site who's a great videographer and also another fellow entrepreneur, and going to shoot an advertisement there and do customer interviews. We're planning some events where we're going to be having speaking opportunities to educate the audience. And actually, I should say what Identified does, just to maybe help give a little background there. So what Identified Technologies does is all industrial job sites have to be tracked and mapped to see how they're progressing. And that's true whether they're putting in a new hospital or doing maybe a mine and they need to move earth for that, or cutting through mountains to put in a new highway. And traditionally that's been done by hand with people marching around with stakes and GPS systems. And that's a very slow process. Doing a 100-acre site can easily take a month, and it's potentially a dangerous process where you're hiking up and down hazardous terrain, trying to dodge giant trucks and not slip down steep inclines. So what we do is we actually automate that process. We have drones where you just push a button on the drone. It'll take itself off, fly the whole area, capturing 3D data, come back, land itself. You scan the data to the cloud where it's processed, and you get full 3D interactive maps that show you the exact progress that you've made, your trends. And now instead of getting your data back a month later, at which point on a fast-moving job site the data is wrong, now you get real-time data so you can make real-time decisions. So that's Identified Technologies, just to maybe help explain a little bit about the robotics and software that we actually offer. And a lot of my job is I mentioned before, looking at what other alternatives are out there. And honestly, our biggest competitor today is just kind of the old way. It's either tracking it with people in the ways I described, or they'll do standard area. Well, they'll bring in a plane or a helicopter. The problem with that is you're paying for the jet fuel, you're paying for the pilot, you're paying to actually have them travel out there, not just actually fly the site, but just to get them to the site. So you can be looking at 20 grand and up every single flight, as opposed to us, you push the button, it flies, and it's actually there's no fee at all. It's just part of a monthly plan. So it's not one of the coolest things about robotics is you're really able to automate things that have never been possible before. And in the construction and industrial sector, the biggest trends now are software as a service, Internet of Things, automation, big data and analytics. And I love that we're just sitting perfectly at the intersection of all those different trends. And what's been so much fun for us, if I worked at a paperclip company, you may have the best paperclips in the world, but it's hard to make that sexy. It's hard to get people, charged up and excited about it. Whereas when people hear drone, they want to hear the story. We have people flooding our booths. We have people asking to write up stories about us, not just because we're good at what we do, but just because we happen to be at a rising trend that has some sex appeal. So I would say one of the most important things that anyone out there can do if they're interested in marketing, it's not just be good at your job, as important as that is, but it's having a product, having a service that people really value and where you're doing something unique. You can be the best marketer in the world. And there, I don't know who was around in the early 90s when pet rocks became a thing. I mean, you do have salesmen so good that they can make pretty mundane objects fly off the shelves, but you can really set yourself up at an advantage when you are working at a company doing something novel.
Very interesting. And I think that's also another career advice right there, as there are some industries which, of course, are in the downturn, some industries that are flat, and some is on the upswing. And so it's also, before you build a career, it's also good to understand that. So you're right. You could be the best marketer, but if you're in a dull industry, may not be, like, for example, retail in North America is being hit very bad, that they're closing stores left, right, and center. So probably not a good time to jump in there when they're closing stores. So anyway,
Absolutely.
that's a side comment there.
It's funny you mentioned that. On my drive over earlier today, I passed by 3 different retail stores, big box, giant retail stores that were all having going out of business sales. Mm-hmm. It's sad to see.
And I bet they don't have a CMO right now because, I'm just thinking, because when you're in a business like that, which is in the downturn, it may not be even fun doing that job when you're just trying to survive. So you do bring up a good point about what you just mentioned. So you mentioned you have a lot of fun. What are some of the things you enjoy about your role? Like, if there are top 2 or 3 things.
Well, I think that being a good marketer or a good innovator is about being at the intersection of a couple of different traits. You have to be curious about how things work, how people work, what makes them tick, what they want, what they value. That's absolutely essential for the role. And you have to be creative in different ways to explore how to solve those problems and how to communicate and express the value that you offer. I think that those are essential. And no matter how good you are at your job, it takes a village. And even if you are a solo marketer, you're still going to be working with engineers, with designers, with salespeople, with finance people. So you have to be collaborative. So I call those my 3 C's of marketing: is curious, creative, and collaborative. You cannot be good at your job if those aren't essential to what you do. And I think being a good marketer, it's not just a job. It has to be the way you're wired, and it has to be who you are. In terms of what I love about my role specifically, it is those 3, but it's also, I'm going to add 2 more C's in, computers, because I get to, and I say get to because I really enjoy it, but I get to work with drones, with cutting edge software, with Salesforce and Photoshop and Google AdWords and all these different online tools. So that is something I really, really enjoy and get into. And the other is constant variety, because you're asking what a day-to-day, I guess, a day in my life looks like. And it really does vary. I mean, one day I'll be on a client site shooting an ad. The next day I'll be doing maybe a PR interview for a magazine. The next day we're working on our digital advertisements. And then the next we're doing content marketing and blog posts and search engine optimization research. I really don't have a standard day, which is part of what I love about my job. I think if I just did any one thing, it would probably eventually get a little stale. But that constant variety really keeps me excited to come in every day.
So I'm also going to ask you this question, because I'm sure every job, every profession, there is the flip side, challenges or things that you do not enjoy. What would you say are some of those?
So I work at still a pretty, smallish startup. We're around 25 people. And because of that, there's really nowhere to hide. You get your results or you don't. And I think if you, it's funny, my friend Eli worked at Westinghouse, and I asked him before I'd ever worked in a big company, what's the best and worst thing about working at a big corporation? And he said, well, the worst thing is you can really work hard, apply yourself, and even if you get great results for the company, it's probably not really going to matter. No one's really going to notice, and you won't really be rewarded. But the best thing is you can really screw up massively, not really work hard, phone it in, and probably no one's really going to notice. Probably won't really matter. And that just isn't true at a startup. Your results matter. Everyone, you feel the impact. Everyone around you feel the impact. But that's part of what does keep me wanting to come in every day and really motivated, not just for myself, but to help out everyone there, and the whole team. So that sense of responsibility is something that is usually enjoyable, but can also be a little bit challenging. We have aggressive deadlines where plenty of organizations, if they're going to put up a new website, that can easily be a 2-year project between research and development and back and forth. Something like that, I think we did it in maybe a month or two.
Wow.
So really just trying to cut the fat every way possible and be as hands-on as possible. A couple other things. I mean, like I said, our team isn't huge, but when we started out, it was 5 or 6 people, and basically at Alpha Lab Gear, and we all knew exactly where the company was, what the priorities were. You turned 2 feet to your left, and then there was the rest of your team. Now, as we've gotten bigger, there can be a little bit of a challenge just setting crystal clear expectations, especially in a fast-moving company where priorities can shift quickly. I think 2 things that have helped us do that are we do open office. So we have, just tables next to each other, no cubicles. And if you have a quick question, you just turn and ask them. You don't have to usually set up meetings for something like that if it's just a quick answer. And that helps us really stay on the same page and move fast. I also do one-on-ones, meeting with each one of my employees every week. And we as a whole organization come together for a town hall meeting once a month, just to kind of reconvene on what our numbers are, what's been accomplished since last time, what our goals are for next time, and just give everyone in the whole company an opportunity to ask questions and make sure that they're well informed and on the same page.
Okay, so that gives me a very thorough understanding of some of the things that you enjoy, some of the challenges. Now, someone listening to this, they think, wow, this sounds exciting. This is the type of career I want to have eventually. So how do you recommend they get started? Like, what does the initial path look like?
I think there's a couple of different ways to go. If you want to work in a startup, there's usually honestly a pretty small barrier to get in because they're just hungry to have somebody that is also passionate about their idea and willing to believe in it and help move the mission forward. I mentioned Alpha Lab Gear. That's the accelerator that we came out of at Identified. And they are, if you're in the Pittsburgh area or if you want to apply there from outside, they do a great job getting brand new companies in that are hungry for talent and basically are happy to give you the opportunity to shine. The problem with joining a startup is they're pretty unstructured and there's not a whole lot usually of support and education or hand-holding. My first day on the job at Identified Technologies, I showed up, Dick pointed to my desk, said, "Here's your desk." I pulled out my laptop and he said, "All right, get to work." That was my onboarding. So if you want something where you're going to have months of training and an experienced team holding your hand, you may want to join a larger organization or an agency where they sort of have the numbers, they have the infrastructure to get you trained and up to speed. Startups tend to be a little bit more of a sink or swim self-education process. The other opportunity would be potentially to go to school for it. But I'd say especially for a lot of those digital skills like pay-per-click advertising or Google Analytics, you're probably going to learn that either as you go or in an agency. I don't know of many universities or colleges that actually teach it.
That's actually my next question. In terms of degrees or certifications, you mentioned some of them you could learn, some of them you could not. So can we talk more about that? Like, does someone need a degree or certification to get
Yeah.
started?
Yeah, so there's a lot of certification services that are great. You can be a certified Google Analytics provider. You can be a certified AdWords provider. You can be certified in HubSpot or Salesforce. So there are those opportunities, but they're not actually given through universities. They're actually given through the programs themselves. So you don't have to kind of go through a particular channel. You would just use that actual resource and then take the test to do it. I would compare marketing, particularly digital marketing, to software development, where you can go to school for it, but many of the best people I know are self-taught. Many either didn't get a college degree or they majored in something completely different. In fact, shout out to our software architect at Identified Technologies, Maurice Ricard, brilliant guy. But, he majored in English. Got a master's in it. He spent time as a bike messenger, did a lot of things that had nothing to do with software development, and then just taught himself the ropes. And now, with quite a bit of experience under his belt, he's unbelievable what he can do. Likewise, my friend Jake, completely self-taught and just one of the brightest and best software developers I know. So, and in fact, his wife Christina, same deal, but for digital marketing. Did not go to school for it, but has worked in many agencies, helped me start Cypher Styles, now is basically the COO of Barclay REI, a giant marketing agency in Pittsburgh, and crushing it. And it's all either completely self-taught or taught on the job. I will say there are some advantages to going to school. I had a great experience at the Tepper School of Business at CMU. I mentioned I met a lot of people there that turned me on to Heinz, which is part of what probably got me down that track. Friends there also sort of put in a good word for me with Dick Zhang at Identified, which helped me get the job. And many of our early customers for Identified actually went to Carnegie Mellon. And I was able to reach out to them, and they were happy to give us a chance just to help out a classmate or an alumni. So I think, I did learn valuable things there. The network is really powerful too. And that's a tough thing to replicate from, an online course or a textbook.
I have so many questions. I don't know where to start with what he just said. So first of all, I just want to make sure people caught this. So there's someone in your company, Maurice, you mentioned, who's a software architect but had an English degree.
You got it.
And I think you mentioned at the beginning, you have a psychology degree, and yet here you are a CMO. So that's actually impressive. So the lesson there for anyone listening, even for myself, is there is a lot of value to experience. Education is great, but experience really trumps that.
Yeah, I agree completely. But, there's a little bit more in common with an English major and a computer science major or a psychology degree and marketing than may appear on first glance. So I actually asked Maurice once, about his job. And he said, well, actually, writing a software program is a lot like writing a book, except it would be like because you skipped the comma on the 100th page of the book, if the whole thing burst into flames. That's what a software program's like. Because if code's buggy, nothing works. But that same attention to detail, that same thoroughness, it's expressed there. And for me, what got me into psychology was I have a lot of doctors in my family, and the values of helping people and solving their problems were really deep. But I hate blood. I hate needles. So going to med school, it just wasn't realistic for me. But psychology was sort of my way of expressing that. And then when I'm doing marketing, I'm trying to do that same thing. I'm trying to find out what makes people tick, what are their problems, how can their lives be better, and then trying to build that and communicate that to give it to them.
Very, very interesting. So the next question, we have to cover the degree. We covered how to get started, right? Now the next question is, so what does an ideal career path look like? So they get started in marketing, and let's say they get to join your ranks, they become a chief marketing officer. Where can it take them from there?
Yeah, good question. I think of what I would call the recommended requirements more as a checklist than a sequence. So the different boxes that you need to check and the different skill sets you need to have, there's no right path to get there. But you eventually probably want to have all these under your belt before you can have that leadership position. I guess, but there's a lot of ways to arrive there. I'd say many paths all take you to the top of the same mountain. And so, some of those skills that I think you'd want to have under your belt are you have to be good with digital pay-per-click advertising. That's things like Google AdWords, Bing, Facebook ads. With Facebook, you have to be good at general social media marketing. That's in particular these days LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, but could also be Instagram or Pinterest, depending on your exact offering. You have to understand search engine optimization, what things like Google need to see to rank you highly, and then be comfortable with content strategy and writing, things like white papers, blog posts, ebooks, case studies. That's all just table stakes for the job. And you don't have to be a master at any one of these, but you have to be good enough that you can do it and you can work with people that do it. You also need to be able to do landing page design for websites, conversion optimization to make sure those websites are getting the actions that you want, things like maybe signing up for a newsletter or downloading a white paper. In most cases, you have to be able to do a little bit of event promotions. That'll be and just event management. So maybe that's getting collateral like brochures and banners for the event, getting people to actually come out to your booth and understand what you're doing and want to talk to you. You have to be able to do market research and customer research. We talked about that before, but the market research is more what your competitors are doing. And then the customer research is more just on an individual level. What are their priorities? What are their values? What are their concerns? And then with all that, you have to be able to do financial modeling and forecasting. So that's to say, if we do this new advertising campaign, or if we invest the $20,000 for this next event, what do we think is going to happen? How many sales is that going to get us? What's the long-term impact on our company from that? And is the investment justified? And kind of forecasting that forward. And then with all that, you also just need to understand how to manage a team. And I think that's something that gets really ignored by a lot of people. They just say, well, if they're good at X, then we'll put some people under them and everything will be great. But management is a real skill. And I think probably bad management is one of the greatest natural resources on the planet. So to have some experience learning from people how to do it well, learning what not to do, I think is really, really important before you're running a team. And then I guess the last few are public relations, that can be press releases, coverage, strategic communications, and then just the basics of design. You don't have to be the world's greatest designer, but you need to at least be able to work with people that are, have a coherent conversation with them, know what to ask for, and make sure you're not getting ripped off. Because I've seen companies paying literally $10,000 for what takes 5 minutes in Photoshop. So to know enough that you can have smart conversations and not get ripped off is absolutely essential.
So Barry, the last question I have is, I know you've shared a lot of ideas here, but if I were to ask you, if I were to wake you up in the middle of the night and say, hey, Barry, what is the only advice, if there is one key advice you will give to someone who wants to get into the field, what would that be?
So it's a good question. I'm going to say something that may seem a little bit opposite to a lot of what I've talked about, but I think I'll try to pull it together to explain, which is if you want to be a great marketer, yes, you have to have a big, broad skill set. But the best way to do that is not to pursue all those different priorities all at once. And well, you can absolutely have it all. You can't have it all at the same time. And each one of the things that I've learned in those areas, I sort of specialized in that area briefly long enough to get good at it. It wasn't spreading myself so thin, because if everything is your first priority, then everything is also your last priority. So I would try to think about which one of those they're maybe most passionate about. Maybe that's social media marketing, maybe that's brand strategy, but whatever they're most curious about, most passionate about, whatever feels like the best fit, start there. Find an opportunity there, whether maybe that's in a corporation if they want more education and structure and less risk. Maybe that's in a startup if they want less barriers and more of a chance just to improvise and take ownership. But either way, find an opportunity to explore that and see, is this really what I want to do? Or is this going to help guide me in another direction? And to be a CMO, you have to enjoy a little bit of everything. But that's not the only right role. Maybe someone gets into social media marketing and they fall in love with it, and they don't want to do a little bit of everything. They want to master that. And they can still rise up either by helping their organization or by joining larger and larger companies or more senior roles. But I feel like sometimes people think of it as, the CMO or the CEO, that is the most prestigious role. That's the role that's going to make me happiest, when for some people it will. But there's no shame at all at finding what you love and sticking with that and getting better and better at that. I want to make that clear. I think sometimes people, and I see this a lot when people are looking for software developers too, but they want kind of this impossible package of someone who can do every single thing possible and does it all incredibly precisely and does it all extremely fast and is super strategic. And those are probably 4 different people. There's not usually going to be one person that can do everything, and organizations will need different things at different times, and you can't hold it against people for sort of being what they are. I had some friends at another robotics company. They hired someone who what they needed was someone really experienced, who was really careful, that would never put out code that had bugs, and they were really frustrated because they left. They took the team for a client visit, came back, and he hadn't gotten that much done. And they were really frustrated. But the thing is, they didn't hire him to be fast. They hired him to be a good leader and to be really careful. That's what he's good at. And I think the same can be true of marketing. I have a very, very broad skill set, and I'm strategic. But I'm not the most precise person in the world. If you really dig, you can probably find a comma missing somewhere. I'm fast, but I'm not the fastest. I mean, there's people that can turn around more. So it's all about kind of knowing what your strengths are, knowing what you're passionate about. And I think as long as you're following those passions and you're honest with yourself, that's how you're going to get the best professional outcome.
I think that's a great advice. And it goes back to finding one's interest and also trying to really, there's a few things I've learned from the last answer. Find your interest, also find what is expected of you within a company. Each company is different, and try to maximize that. You don't have to be the master of everything, but if it depends on your position. So that's what I got out of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Barry, thanks once again for joining us. This is a great, you shared a lot of great insights about marketing, about what a CMO does. I'm sure I've learned a few things. I'm sure the audience will learn a few things as well as they're listening to this episode. So thanks for being a guest.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. If anyone wants to follow up, go to identifiedtech.com. You can reach me at brapkin at identifiedtech.com, or go to barrybrands.com. And happy to answer any follow-up questions. And Nisar, I really appreciate you having me on today.
You are welcome, Barry. Thank you. Thank you, folks, for listening to this episode of the CareerMetis Podcast. I have written a brief summary of the interview as part of a blog post, and also will be adding all the links and resources that Barry has mentioned in the same blog post. If you enjoyed this episode and also learned something new, feel free to post a review or a comment. And if you really loved it, definitely go ahead and share the episode among your network. Until next time, this is Nisar Ahmed, your host for the CareerMetis Podcast. Thank you.